The rain hammered against the cracked asphalt of Highway 95 as Commander Sarah Chen pulled her black Honda Civic to the shoulder. Steam rose from under the hood, mixing with the cold November air outside Las Vegas. She stepped out, her civilian clothes already soaking through as she examined the overheated engine. After 15 years of military service, including 7 years leading some of America's most elite special operations teams, Sarah had faced down terrorists in 3 different countries. Yet here she was, defeated by a broken radiator hose on a lonely stretch of Nevada highway. Sarah wiped rainwater from her face and reached for her phone. No signal. The irony wasn't lost on her that someone who had coordinated multi-million-dollar operations across encrypted satellite networks couldn't get a simple cell tower connection when she needed it most. She glanced at her watch. 2:30 a.m. She had been driving back to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado after a classified briefing at Nellis Air Force Base 1 that had run far longer than expected. The headlights appeared through the rain like distant stars, growing brighter as they approached. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and wariness as the Nevada State Police cruiser slowed and pulled behind her vehicle. 2 officers emerged, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The taller one, whose nameplate read Officer Martinez, approached while his partner, Officer Thompson, hung back near their vehicle. "Evening, ma'am. Having car trouble?" Martinez asked, his tone professional but cautious. His eyes swept over Sarah's appearance. A petite Asian-American woman in her late 30s, wearing jeans and a UCLA sweatshirt, her long black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Yes, officer. Engine overheated about 10 minutes ago. I was trying to get a cell signal to call for assistance," Sarah replied, maintaining the calm, measured tone that had served her well in countless high-pressure situations. Martinez nodded and glanced at Thompson, who was now walking closer. "Can I see your license and registration, please?" Sarah reached into her purse and handed over her California driver's license. As Martinez examined it with his flashlight, his expression shifted slightly. "Sarah Chen, address in Coronado. What brings you out here this time of night?" "Chen?" "I was driving home from a business meeting," Sarah answered truthfully, though she couldn't elaborate on the classified nature of her work. This was always the challenge of her position, being one of the highest-ranking women in Navy special warfare while maintaining operational security that often made her seem like a civilian to those who didn't know better. Thompson stepped closer, studying Sarah with obvious suspicion. "Business meeting at 2:30 in the morning? What kind of business are you in exactly?" Sarah sensed the shift in atmosphere. She had experienced this before, the automatic assumption that a young-looking Asian woman couldn't possibly be what she claimed to be. "I work for the federal government," she said carefully. "Uh-huh," Thompson replied, his skepticism evident. "What department?" "Department of Defense." Martinez and Thompson exchanged glances. Thompson pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, can you run a wants and warrants on a California license?" He read off Sarah's license number. Sarah remained calm, though she felt the familiar frustration building inside her. She had spent years proving herself in a male-dominated field where every achievement was questioned, every promotion scrutinized. She had earned her position through countless deployments, leading teams into some of the most dangerous situations imaginable. Yet here she stood on a dark highway, being treated like a potential criminal because she didn't fit someone's narrow expectations. The radio crackled back. "No wants or warrants on that license." Thompson wasn't satisfied. "Miss Chen, I'm going to need you to be more specific about your employment. Department of Defense is pretty vague." Sarah calculated her options. She could reveal her military rank and position, but doing so might compromise operational security protocols she had sworn to uphold. Her current assignment involved sensitive intelligence operations that required her to maintain a low profile even among law enforcement. On the other hand, this situation was rapidly escalating beyond a simple traffic stop. "I'm a Navy officer," she said finally, choosing her words carefully. Abelette Thompson laughed, not bothering to hide his disbelief. "A Navy officer? Really? Do you have any identification to prove that?" Sarah's military ID was in her wallet, but it contained classified security clearance information that she wasn't supposed to display to unauthorized personnel. "My military identification contains sensitive information that I'm not authorized to show to civilians." "Convenient," Thompson said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Martinez, I think we've got ourselves an impersonator here." Martinez looked uncomfortable, but didn't contradict his partner. Ma'am, impersonating a military officer is a federal crime. I'm going to need you to provide proof of your claims, or we'll have to take you in for questioning. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. She had faced down armed insurgents in Afghanistan, had made split-second decisions that saved American lives, had earned the respect of the toughest warriors in the world. But none of that mattered to these two officers who saw only what they expected to see. A small Asian woman who couldn't possibly be telling the truth about her military service. Officers, I understand your skepticism, but I assure you I am who I say I am. If you contact Naval Amphibious Base Coronado and ask to speak with the duty officer, they can verify my identity. Thompson shook his head. It's almost 3 a.m. We're not waking up some duty officer because you want to play soldier. Martinez, cuff her. Wait, Martinez said, holding up a hand. Something in Sarah's demeanor gave him pause. Despite the absurdity of the situation, she remained completely calm, showing none of the nervousness or agitation he typically saw from people who were lying. Ma'am, you say you're a Navy officer. What's your rank? Sarah looked directly into his eyes. I'm a commander in the United States Navy Special Warfare Command. Thompson burst out laughing. Special warfare? You mean like the SEALs? Lady, I've seen the SEALs, and you ain't one of them. I didn't say I was a SEAL, Sarah replied evenly. I said I was in Special Warfare Command. The distinction was lost on Thompson, but Martinez seemed to be thinking. What exactly do you do in this Special Warfare Command? Sarah chose her words carefully. I lead planning and coordination for special operations missions. From behind a desk, right? Thompson interjected. Because women aren't allowed in combat roles. Sarah almost smiled at the irony. Thompson was partially right. Women hadn't been officially allowed in direct combat roles until recent years. But Sarah's career had begun during a different era, when exceptional circumstances and pressing operational needs had created opportunities for women like her to serve in capacities that weren't officially recognized at the time. Her path to command had been anything but conventional. The rules have changed recently, she said simply. Martinez was studying her more carefully now. There was something about her bearing her confidence that didn't match his preconceptions. He had served in the Army before becoming a police officer and had encountered enough military personnel to recognize certain qualities. The way someone carried themselves. The calmness under pressure. The precise way they spoke. Look, he said to Thompson, maybe we should make that call to Coronado. It can't hurt to verify. Thompson was having none of it. Martinez, we're not calling some military base because this woman is spinning fairy tales. She's probably some wannabe who watches too many movies. I've had enough of this. He stepped towards Sarah with handcuffs in hand. Ma'am, you're under arrest for impersonating a military officer. You have the right to remain silent. As Thompson began reading her Miranda rights, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She had spent her entire career operating in the shadows, her achievements known only to a small circle of cleared personnel. But sometimes she realized the shadows weren't enough. Officer Martinez, she said quietly, her voice cutting through Thompson's recitation. In my wallet, there's a business card. The number on that card connects directly to a 24-hour secure line. The person who answers will have the authority to verify everything I've told you. Thompson paused in his reading of the rights. Another game? Call the number, Sarah said, looking directly at Martinez. Ask them about Commander Sarah Chen. Ask them about Operation Neptune Spear. Ask them about the Bin Laden raid. Martinez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November rain. Operation Neptune Spear wasn't common knowledge among the general public, certainly not the kind of detail someone would know unless they had been involved. He reached for Sarah's wallet, found the business card, and studied it in the beam of his flashlight. The card was simple, black with white text. No fancy logos or graphics, just a phone number and the words Emergency Contact Classification Level, TS/CI. Thompson, Martinez said quietly, I think we need to make this call. But Thompson was already reaching for his handcuffs, his mind made up. I don't care what game she's playing. She's coming with us. As the metal clicked around Sarah's wrists, she remained perfectly calm. She had been in far worse situations than this, though admittedly, Most of those had involved foreign enemies rather than her own country's law enforcement. She knew that the next few hours would either validate everything she had worked for or potentially compromise operations that were vital to national security. The rain continued to fall as they led her to the police cruiser, her Honda Civic abandoned on the shoulder, with its hood still smoking in the darkness. As they drove toward the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Station, Sarah stared out at the neon lights of the city and reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. She had grown up in a middle-class family in San Francisco, the daughter of immigrants who had fled China in the 1960s. Her parents had dreamed of her becoming a doctor or engineer, following a safe, predictable path to success. They never could have imagined that their quiet, studious daughter would one day command operations that made headlines around the world. Even if her name was never mentioned in those headlines, the police station was a buzz of activity despite the late hour. Thompson led her through the booking process with obvious satisfaction, taking her fingerprints and photographing her like any common criminal. Martinez watched the proceedings with growing unease, the business card still in his pocket. "I'm telling you, Martinez, you're overthinking this," Thompson said as they placed Sarah in a holding cell. "She's just another wannabe with an elaborate story, you'll see." But Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a serious mistake. As soon as Thompson left to file his paperwork, Martinez pulled out the business card and dialed the number. The phone was answered on the first ring. "Secure line, duty officer speaking." Martinez felt his mouth go dry. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, unmistakably military. "This is Officer Martinez, Nevada State Police. I have someone in custody who claims to be a Navy commander named Sarah Chen. She gave me this number to verify her identity." There was a brief pause. "Officer Martinez, can you provide me with your badge number and the location where you're calling from?" Martinez complied, feeling increasingly nervous about the direction this conversation was taking. "Hold the line, Officer Martinez." The wait felt like an eternity. Martinez could hear typing in the background, the sound of urgent conversations, the unmistakable atmosphere of a military operations center at work. The voice came back, and its tone had changed completely. "Officer Martinez, you need to listen to me very carefully. The person you have in custody is Commander Sarah Chen, United States Navy. She holds a top-secret security clearance and is currently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Command. She is authorized to conduct classified operations throughout the continental United States." Martinez felt the blood drain from his face. The voice continued. "Commander Chen's current assignment is classified at the highest levels. By detaining her, you may have inadvertently compromised ongoing national security operations. I need you to release her immediately and ensure that no record of this incident appears in any official reports." But my partner," Martinez stammered. "Officer Martinez, I'm going to transfer you to Admiral Richardson, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. He will provide you with verification of Commander Chen's identity and explain the sensitivity of this situation." The line went silent for a moment before a new voice came on, older, carrying the unmistakable authority of senior military command. "Officer Martinez, this is Admiral Richardson. Commander Chen is one of my most valuable officers, and her current mission is critical to national security. I'm going to ask you to release her immediately and provide her with whatever assistance she needs to continue her assignment." Martinez's hands were shaking now. "Admiral, my partner arrested her. He's filing charges for impersonating a military officer." When the Admiral spoke again, his voice was ice-cold. "Officer Martinez, those charges will be dropped immediately. I'm going to have someone from Naval Criminal Investigative Service contact your department within the hour to explain the situation to your superiors. Commander Chen's cover cannot be compromised. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely clear." "Good. Put Commander Chen on the phone." Martinez walked toward the holding cell where Sarah sat calmly on the metal bench, looking like she was meditating rather than sitting in jail. She glanced up as he approached, and he saw something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. The steady gaze of someone who had seen things he couldn't imagine. "Commander Chen," he said quietly, "there's a call for you." Sarah took the phone from Officer Martinez's trembling hand, her expression remaining perfectly composed despite having spent the last hour in a holding cell. She had been through worse situations than this, though, admittedly, most of them had involved foreign adversaries rather than her own country's law enforcement officers. "Admiral Richardson," she said simply, recognizing the voice immediately. "Commander Chen, are you secure to speak?" Sarah glanced around the small holding area. Martinez had stepped back several feet, but she could see Thompson approaching from across the room, his face showing confusion and growing concern as he noticed Martinez's pale complexion and nervous demeanor. "Relatively secure, sir, but not completely." "Understood. Are you injured? Have you been mistreated in any way?" "No, sir." The officers were following standard procedures based on their understanding of the situation. Admiral Richardson's voice carried the weight of decades of military command. "Commander, I'm going to have NCIS handle the cleanup on this incident. Your cover for Operation Silent Thunder has been compromised, but we can work around it. The mission continues as planned." "Yes, sir. I'm sending a team to extract you within the hour. In the meantime, I need you to assess whether these officers can be trusted to maintain operational security." Sarah looked at Martinez, who was staring at her with a mixture of amazement and horror as he realized the magnitude of his partner's mistake. Thompson had now reached them and was demanding answers, his voice rising as he began to understand that something had gone very wrong with what he thought was a routine arrest. "I believe one of them can be trusted, sir. The other may require additional guidance. Put Officer Martinez back on the line." Sarah handed the phone to Martinez, who took it like it might explode in his hands. "This is Martinez. Officer Martinez? Commander Chen is going to brief you on what needs to happen next. Follow her instructions exactly. Any deviation from her guidance could result in serious national security implications. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Good. And Officer Martinez? Thank you for making the right call. Your country owes you a debt of gratitude." The line went dead. Martinez stared at the phone for a moment before looking at Sarah with new eyes. She was no longer just a woman who had been arrested for impersonating a military officer. She was Commander Sarah Chen, and apparently, she was someone very important to very powerful people. Thompson reached them just as Martinez hung up the phone. "What the hell is going on here, Martinez? Why are you taking phone calls from the prisoner?" Sarah stepped forward, her entire demeanor shifting. The quiet, submissive woman who had been arrested an hour earlier was gone, replaced by someone who radiated command presence. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Officer Thompson, I need you to listen very carefully. What I'm about to tell you is classified, but given the circumstances, you need to understand the situation you've stumbled into." Thompson's mouth opened to argue, but something in Sarah's bearing stopped him cold. Martinez touched his partner's arm. "Thompson, just listen to her, please." Sarah began to speak, her words measured and precise. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen, United States Navy. I hold the rank of 05 and am currently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Command. For the past 7 years, I have led planning and coordination for some of the most sensitive special operations missions conducted by this country." Thompson looked like he was about to laugh, but the expression on Martinez's face stopped him. His partner looked like he had seen a ghost. Sarah continued. 3 years ago, I was selected to head a new initiative within Special Warfare Command focused on integrating female personnel into previously male-only special operations units. This program, known as Project Silent Thunder, has been classified at the highest levels because of its potential impact on ongoing operations worldwide. She paused, letting that information sink in before continuing. "Officer Thompson, when you arrested me tonight, you didn't just arrest a woman pretending to be a military officer. You arrested one of the key architects of America's next generation of special operations capabilities." Thompson's skepticism was crumbling, but he wasn't ready to surrender completely. "Even if that's true, women aren't allowed in the SEALs. Everyone knows that." Sarah's expression didn't change. "Officer Thompson, what everyone knows and what actually happens in classified military programs are often two very different things. The official integration of women into special operations units was announced last year. What wasn't announced was that selected women have been participating in special operations missions for much longer than that. operating under strict cover protocols. Martinez was connecting the dots. You're saying you've actually been on combat missions? Like real combat? I'm saying that I've led missions that have resulted in the elimination of high-value targets, the disruption of terrorist networks, and the protection of American interests around the world. Some of those missions have received media attention, though my involvement was never disclosed. This is insane. You're telling me that you're some kind of secret female SEAL? I'm telling you that I'm a naval special warfare officer who has been given responsibilities and authorities that very few people in this country possess. The specific details of my operational history are classified, but I can tell you that Admiral Richardson didn't transfer you to my phone line because he was impressed by my filing skills. The holding cell area had grown quiet as other officers and staff began to notice the unusual conversation taking place. Sarah was acutely aware that every additional person who overheard this discussion represented a potential security breach. Gentlemen, we need to move this conversation somewhere more private. Officer Martinez, is there a secure room where we can speak? Martinez nodded and led them to a small interview room. As they walked, Sarah noticed the changed dynamic. Both officers were now treating her with a deference that hadn't existed an hour earlier. The handcuffs had been removed, and Thompson's earlier swagger had been replaced by nervous uncertainty. Once they were seated in the interview room, Sarah laid out the situation in stark terms. The mission I was returning from tonight involves a potential terrorist threat to a major American city. I can't provide you with the specific details, but time is critical. Every hour we delay increases the risk to civilian lives. Thompson leaned forward. If this is true, why didn't you just tell us who you were from the beginning? Because, Officer Thompson, my operational security protocols require me to maintain my cover even when interacting with law enforcement. The nature of my work means that my identity and capabilities must be protected at all costs. Revealing them to unauthorized personnel can compromise not just my own safety, but the safety of other operatives and ongoing missions. Martinez was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. So when you said you worked for the Department of Defense, you were actually telling the truth, just not the whole truth. And when I told you I couldn't show you my military ID, it wasn't because I didn't have one. It was because that ID contained security clearance information that you don't have the authorization to see. Thompson ran his hands through his hair. Jesus Christ. We really screwed this up, didn't we? Before Sarah could answer, there was a knock on the interview room door. A police sergeant entered, his expression grim. Martinez, Thompson, I need to speak with both of you immediately. And apparently, I need to apologize to Commander Chen. The sergeant introduced himself as Sergeant Williams and explained that he had just received a phone call from the FBI's Las Vegas field office, followed immediately by a call from someone claiming to be the Deputy Director of Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Gentlemen, it appears we have a situation here that is well above our pay grade. Commander Chen, I've been instructed to provide you with whatever assistance you need and to ensure that no record of this incident appears in our official reports. Sarah stood, her command presence now unmistakable. Sergeant Williams, I appreciate your cooperation. My primary concern right now is continuing my mission. I need transportation back to my vehicle and assistance with getting it roadworthy. Already taken care of, ma'am. We have a tow truck en route to your location, and our mechanic is standing by to make whatever repairs are necessary. Thompson looked confused. Wait, we're just going to let her go? What about the arrest report? The booking photos? Sergeant Williams fixed him with a stern look. Officer Thompson, there is no arrest report. There are no booking photos. As far as our records are concerned, we assisted a stranded motorist tonight and provided her with transportation to get her vehicle repaired. But, Officer Thompson, Sarah interrupted, let me explain something to you about how classified operations work. When something is classified at the level I operate at, it simply doesn't exist in official records. The arrest that you think you made tonight never happened. The charges you thought you were filing will never appear in any database. From a legal standpoint, I was never here. Martinez was staring at her with something approaching awe. How is that possible? Because there are people in Washington whose job it is to ensure that operations like mine can continue without interference. When those people make phone calls, paperwork disappears, Records are deleted, and official reports are never filed. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Thompson looked like he was going to be sick. "Commander Chen," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. A big one. I made assumptions about you based on prejudice. I was wrong." Sarah studied him for a moment before responding. "Officer Thompson, you made assumptions based on your experience and training. Most of the time, those assumptions probably serve you well. Tonight was an exceptional circumstance. But I was so sure you were lying. I mean, you just don't look like what? Like a warrior? Like someone who could lead men into combat?" Sarah's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. "Officer Thompson, I've found that the most dangerous people often don't look like what you'd expect. Some of the most lethal operatives I've worked with could pass for librarians or accountants." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I've spent my entire adult life proving that I belonged in rooms where no one expected to see me. I've earned my rank and my position through performance, not politics. Every mission I've led, every operation I've planned, every life-or-death decision I've made has been evaluated by the same standards applied to my male counterparts." Martinez leaned forward. "Commander, can you tell us anything about what you actually do? I mean, without violating security protocols?" Sarah considered the question. The conversation had already moved far beyond what was normally authorized. But given the circumstances and the need to ensure these officers' cooperation, some additional disclosure might be necessary. "I can tell you that I've been involved in operations that have made international headlines, though my role was never reported. I can tell you that I've worked directly with SEAL teams, Delta Force, and other special operations units in planning and executing missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other locations that I can't specify." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I can also tell you that the mission I'm currently involved in is time-sensitive and critical to preventing a significant threat to American lives. The phone calls that have been made tonight, the involvement of senior military officials and federal agencies, all of that is happening because stopping this threat takes precedence over normal protocols." Thompson shook his head in amazement. "And we almost screwed it all up, because I couldn't believe a woman could be telling the truth about being in the military. Officer Thompson, the military has changed dramatically in recent years. The barriers that once prevented women from serving in combat roles have been systematically removed. What hasn't changed is the tendency for people to assume that women in the military must be in support roles rather than combat positions." Sergeant Williams looked at his watch. "Commander Chen, your transportation should be here shortly. Is there anything else we can do to assist with your mission?" Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed with an encrypted text message. She read it quickly, her expression becoming more serious. "Actually, Sergeant, there is something. I need to make a secure phone call, and then I'm going to need to ask for your help with something that's going to sound very unusual." The three police officers exchanged glances. After everything they had experienced tonight, they were beginning to realize that unusual was probably going to be the norm when dealing with Commander Sarah Chen. Sarah looked directly at each of them. "What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. Lives depend on your discretion." They nodded solemnly. "The terrorist threat I mentioned isn't theoretical. Based on intelligence we've gathered, there's going to be an attack on Las Vegas within the next 48 hours. The target is a major hotel on the Strip during a high-profile event." The room went dead silent. "My mission was to coordinate with federal agencies and local law enforcement to prevent this attack. But my arrest tonight has delayed those coordination efforts by several critical hours." Sergeant Williams was the first to speak. "Commander, whatever you need, you have it. Full stop." Sarah smiled for the first time that evening. "Sergeant, I was hoping you'd say that. Because I'm going to need your help to save this city." The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Headquarters transformed into an impromptu command center within 2 hours of Sarah's revelation about the terrorist threat. What had begun as a simple traffic stop had evolved into one of the most complex counterterrorism operations ever conducted on American soil, and Sarah found herself at the center of it all. In the main conference room, federal agents from multiple agencies worked alongside local police officers, their laptops and secure communication devices spread across every available surface. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force had arrived first, followed closely by representatives from Homeland Security, ATF, and the Nevada National Guard. But it was clear to everyone in the room that Commander Sarah Chen was running the show. Sarah stood before a large wall-mounted display, pointing to satellite imagery of the Las Vegas Strip as she briefed the assembled team on the intelligence that had brought her to Nevada. The target is the Venetian Hotel and Casino, specifically the main convention center where the International Technology Summit is being held tomorrow evening. Our intelligence indicates that the attack will occur during the opening ceremony, when approximately 4,000 attendees will be present. Agent Rodriguez from the FBI raised her hand. Commander, what's the source of this intelligence? How confident are we in its accuracy? Sarah glanced toward a corner of the room where two men in dark suits stood silently. They had arrived 30 minutes earlier, introducing themselves only as federal personnel and showing credentials that immediately ended any questions about their presence. The intelligence comes from multiple sources, including intercepted communications and human intelligence assets. The confidence level is high enough that Admiral Richardson authorized me to break cover and coordinate directly with local authorities. Agent Martinez from Homeland Security leaned forward. What kind of attack are we looking at? Explosives? Chemical? Biological? Based on the intercepted communications, we're dealing with a coordinated assault involving multiple explosive devices and armed assailants. The planning suggests a level of sophistication that indicates professional training and significant resources. Officer Martinez, who had arrested Sarah just hours earlier, sat in the back of the room taking notes. The transformation he had witnessed was remarkable. The quiet woman he had pulled handcuffs on was now commanding the attention and respect of some of the most senior law enforcement officials in the state. Every person in the room hung on her words, and when she gave instructions, they were followed without question. The terrorist cell consists of at least 6 individuals. Sarah continued. 4 are already in Las Vegas, and our surveillance teams have been tracking their movements for the past week. 2 additional members are en route from out of state and should arrive sometime tomorrow morning. Lieutenant Colonel Harris from the Nevada National Guard studied the tactical display. Commander, what's our operational plan? How do we neutralize this threat without creating panic or endangering civilians? This was the moment Sarah had been preparing for throughout her career. Everything she had learned, every mission she had led, every impossible decision she had been forced to make, had brought her to this point. The responsibility was enormous, but she felt the familiar calm that always settled over her when the stakes were highest. We have 2 primary objectives, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. First, we identify and neutralize all members of the terrorist cell before they can execute their attack. Second, we do this without compromising the safety of innocent civilians or creating mass panic that could result in casualties. She clicked a remote, and the display changed to show detailed floor plans of the Venetian Hotel and Casino. The attack is planned for tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. during the opening ceremony of the Technology Summit. Based on our intelligence, the terrorists plan to detonate explosive devices in 3 separate locations within the convention center, followed by an armed assault on the survivors. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Agent Rodriguez spoke first. Commander, that's a soft target with limited security. If they succeed in getting explosives inside, they won't succeed, Sarah said firmly, because we're going to stop them before they get that far. She clicked the remote again, and the display showed a detailed timeline of the planned operation. At 0600 tomorrow morning, federal agents will begin coordinated surveillance of all known terrorist locations. At 1400 hours, we'll initiate the arrests of the 4 cell members currently in Las Vegas. The 2 members arriving from out of state will be apprehended at McCarran International Airport. Lieutenant Colonel Harris raised a concern. Commander, that's a very tight timeline. If any part of the operation goes wrong, if even one terrorist escapes the net, they could still carry out some version of the attack. Sarah nodded. You're absolutely right, Colonel. That's why we're not going to rely solely on arrests. We're also going to implement comprehensive security measures at the Venetian, including explosive detection teams, additional security personnel, and a complete sweep of the convention center. Agent Martinez looked skeptical. Commander, with respect, That level of security deployment is going to be noticed. If the terrorists see federal agents swarming the hotel, they might move up their timeline or change their target, which is why the security measures will be implemented under the guise of a routine security drill, Sarah replied. The Venetian's management has been briefed under strict confidentiality protocols. As far as anyone else knows, this is a standard exercise designed to test emergency procedures. Officer Thompson, who had been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke up. Commander, what if the intelligence is wrong? What if they're planning to hit a different target? Or what if the timing is different? It was a question that had been weighing on Sarah's mind since she first received the intelligence briefing at Nellis Air Force Base. In special operations, you worked with the best information available. But there were never guarantees. The difference between success and catastrophic failure often came down to judgment calls made under pressure with incomplete information. Officer Thompson, that's the nature of intelligence work. We act on the best information available and prepare contingencies for alternative scenarios. If we're wrong about the target or timing, we adjust and respond. But if we're right and we do nothing, thousands of people could die. She turned back to the display, bringing up surveillance footage of the 4 terrorists currently in Las Vegas. These are the individuals we're tracking. Ahmed Hassan, Syrian national, suspected of involvement in attacks in Damascus and Aleppo. Yusuf al-Rashid, Iraqi national, bomb-making expert with connections to ISIS. Marcus Webb, American citizen, former Army explosives specialist dishonorably discharged in 2019. And Dmitry Volkov, Russian national, suspected arms dealer with ties to multiple terrorist organizations. The photos showed 4 men of varying ages and ethnicities, united only by their shared commitment to causing maximum carnage. Sarah had studied their files extensively, memorizing their known capabilities and behavioral patterns. Hassan and al-Rashid are staying at a motel on Paradise Road. Webb has a room at a different motel near the airport. Volkov is staying in a short-term rental apartment downtown. All 4 locations are under surveillance as of 2 hours ago. Agent Rodriguez was taking detailed notes. What about weapons and explosives? Have we identified where they're storing their materials? We believe the explosives are being stored in a warehouse on the industrial side of town. ATF is preparing a tactical team to secure that location simultaneously with the arrests. The warehouse is registered to a shell company that we've traced back to Volkov. Lieutenant Colonel Harris studied the tactical timeline. Commander, coordinating simultaneous raids at 5 different locations is incredibly complex. Are you confident we have the resources and coordination capabilities to pull this off? In Afghanistan, she had coordinated operations involving multiple SEAL teams, Army Rangers, and Afghan Special Forces, but those had been in a combat zone where everyone understood the rules of engagement. This operation required the same level of precision and coordination, but with the added complexity of operating on American soil with civilian safety as the primary concern. Colonel, I've led operations with similar complexity in much more challenging environments. The key is clear communication, precise timing, and contingency planning for every possible scenario. She clicked the remote again, bringing up a detailed operational timeline. At 0500, all surveillance teams will be in position. At 0600, we begin active monitoring of all targets. At 1200, federal tactical teams will move into pre-assault positions. At 1400, we execute coordinated arrests at all locations simultaneously. Officer Martinez raised his hand. Commander, what's our role in all of this? Local police, I mean. Sarah had been hoping someone would ask that question. The success of the operation depended not just on federal resources, but on the cooperation and expertise of local law enforcement who knew the city better than anyone. Officer Martinez, local police are crucial to this operation's success. We need your knowledge of the city, your relationships with hotel security personnel, and your ability to provide perimeter support during the tactical operations. She pointed to specific locations on the display. Las Vegas Metro will provide traffic control and perimeter security during the raids. You'll also coordinate with hotel security to ensure civilian evacuation routes are clear and that emergency services have unobstructed access if needed. Sergeant Williams, who had been observing silently from the back of the room, stepped forward. Commander Chen, My officers and I are honored to be part of this operation. After what happened earlier tonight, we understand the level of trust you're placing in us. Sarah looked around the room at the assembled team. Federal agents, military officers, and local police officers who had come together in response to a threat against their city. It was exactly the kind of multi-agency cooperation that made America's counterterrorism capabilities so effective. But it required leadership that could coordinate diverse personalities and organizations under extreme pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, I want everyone to understand the stakes we're dealing with. If this terrorist attack succeeds, it won't just be a tragedy for Las Vegas. It will be seen as a demonstration that America's homeland security can be penetrated, that our citizens aren't safe in their own country. She paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. More importantly, 4,000 innocent people are going to that technology summit tomorrow night, expecting to network, learn, and enjoy themselves. They're trusting us to keep them safe, even though they don't know we exist. Agent Rodriguez nodded solemnly. Commander, what's our backup plan if something goes wrong? If the primary operation fails, we have contingencies in place. The summit will be quietly canceled under the pretense of a security concern. The hotel will be evacuated, and we'll hunt down every member of this terrorist cell until they're either in custody or neutralized. Lieutenant Colonel Harris looked grim. And if they've already moved the explosives into the hotel? Then we go to Plan C, Sarah said simply. We evacuate the entire strip if necessary, and treat this as an active war zone until the threat is eliminated. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. A full evacuation of the Las Vegas Strip would affect hundreds of thousands of people and cause economic damage in the billions. It would also represent a massive victory for the terrorists, even if they were ultimately stopped. But it won't come to that, Sarah continued, her voice carrying absolute conviction, because we're going to execute this operation flawlessly. We're going to arrest every terrorist, secure every weapon and explosive device, and ensure that those 4,000 people at the Technology Summit have no idea how close they came to disaster. Officer Thompson looked up from his notes. Commander, you seem very confident. How can you be so sure? Sarah smiled, and for a moment the weight of command lifted from her shoulders. Officer Thompson, I've been planning and executing operations like this for 15 years. I've led teams into situations where failure meant death, not just for me but for the people counting on me to bring them home safely. She gestured toward the tactical display. This operation is complex, but it's not impossible. We have excellent intelligence, highly trained personnel, and the element of surprise. Most importantly, we have something the terrorists don't have. We're fighting to protect innocent people, not to destroy them. The briefing continued for another hour, covering communications protocols, rules of engagement, and contingency procedures. By the time it was finished, every person in the room understood their role and the critical importance of perfect execution. As the meeting broke up and various agencies began their final preparations, Officer Martinez approached Sarah privately. Commander, I have to ask, how did you get into this line of work? I mean, what led you to become someone who does this? Sarah considered the question as she gathered her materials. It was something she was asked occasionally, usually by junior officers, trying to understand how careers like hers were possible. Officer Martinez, I joined the Navy because I wanted to serve my country. I stayed in special operations because I discovered I was good at it, and because the work was important. But the honest answer is that I never planned to be standing in a police station at 4 a.m. coordinating a counter-terrorism operation. She paused, looking around the now empty conference room. Sometimes life puts you in situations where you have to choose between what's comfortable and what's necessary. 15 years ago, I chose necessary. Tomorrow morning, we all get to make that choice again. As the first hints of dawn began to appear outside the windows, Sarah realized that in less than 18 hours, her decisions would determine whether thousands of innocent people lived or died. It was exactly the kind of responsibility she had trained for her entire career, but the weight of it never got easier to bear. The real test was about to begin. The warehouse district on the outskirts of Las Vegas hummed with an unusual energy at 5:30 a.m. To passing motorists, the increased activity might have looked like an early shift change at one of the industrial facilities. But hidden among the legitimate workers were federal agents, military personnel, and local police officers preparing for one of the most complex counterterrorism operations ever conducted on American soil. Commander Sarah Chen crouched behind an FBI surveillance van, studying live video feeds from drones circling high above the city. 4 separate tactical teams were moving into position simultaneously, each targeting a different component of the terrorist cell that planned to attack the Las Vegas Strip later that evening. "Surveillance confirms all targets are in position," reported Agent Rodriguez through Sarah's earpiece. "Hassan and Al-Rashid are still at the Paradise Road Motel. Webb is at the airport location. Volkov is at the downtown apartment." Sarah clicked her radio. "Copy that. Warehouse team, what's your status?" Lieutenant Colonel Harris responded from his position overlooking the industrial complex where the terrorists were believed to have stored their explosives. "We have eyes on the target building. No movement detected in the past hour. Ready to proceed on your signal." This was the moment that defined Special Operations leadership. The point where all the planning, intelligence gathering, and preparation came down to a series of split-second decisions that would determine success or failure. Sarah had been in this position countless times before, but never with so many moving parts, and never with American lives hanging in the balance on American soil. "All teams, this is Commander Chen. Operation Silent Thunder is now active. Initiate Phase 1 surveillance protocols." Across the city, dozens of federal agents and military personnel began their final approach to predetermined positions. The operation required perfect timing. If even one terrorist escaped the initial sweep, they could warn the others or attempt to execute a modified version of their attack plan.
Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Admiral Richardson at Naval Special Warfare Command.
POTUS has been briefed. National security priority. Execute with extreme prejudice if necessary. The weight of that message settled on Sarah's shoulders. Presidential notification meant that this operation was being monitored at the highest levels of government. Success would barely be acknowledged, but failure would have consequences that rippled through the entire national security establishment. "Commander Chen." Agent Martinez's voice came through the radio. "We have a problem at the warehouse location." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of problem?" "Our surveillance drone is picking up additional heat signatures inside the building." "At least 3 more individuals than we expected." Sarah closed her eyes and ran through the implications. Either their intelligence had been incomplete, or the terrorist cell was larger than they had initially assessed. Both possibilities meant that the carefully planned operation was already deviating from the script. "Can you identify the additional individuals? Are they civilians or additional terrorists?" "Unknown at this time. Movement patterns suggest they're not hostages. They appear to be working in coordination with our known targets." Sarah made a decision that would have long-term implications for her career and potentially for national security. "All teams, hold position. We're adjusting the operational parameters." She switched to a secure channel that connected her directly with Admiral Richardson. "Admiral, we have additional hostile personnel at the primary location, requesting permission to modify engagement protocols." Richardson's response was immediate. "Commander, what's your assessment?" "Sir, we're looking at a larger cell than originally anticipated. Minimum 6 individuals, possibly more. The warehouse operation is going to require additional tactical resources." There was a brief pause before Richardson responded. "Commander, you have full operational authority. Use whatever resources necessary to complete the mission." Sarah understood what the Admiral was really saying. She had carte blanche to do whatever was required to stop the terrorist attack, regardless of cost or political consequences. It was both liberating and terrifying. "All team leaders, this is Commander Chen. We're upgrading to enhanced tactical protocols. I repeat, enhanced tactical protocols are now in effect." The change in designation meant that all teams were authorized to use lethal force without additional clearance. It also meant that if the operation went wrong, Sarah would be personally responsible for the consequences. Agent Rodriguez's voice came through the radio. "Commander, enhanced protocols confirmed. Teams are adjusting positions accordingly." Sarah studied the tactical display on her tablet, watching as red dots representing her personnel moved to new positions around the city. Each dot represented highly trained individuals who were risking their lives based on her intelligence assessment and operational planning. Warehouse team, I need a detailed count of personnel inside the target building. Lieutenant Colonel Harris responded, after a tense pause. Confirmed 7 individuals inside the warehouse. Movement patterns suggest they're preparing some kind of equipment, possible bomb-making activity. The revelation changed everything. If the terrorists were actively preparing explosive devices, waiting for the coordinated 2 p.m. arrests might be too late. They could complete their preparations and move the bombs to the target location before the raids occurred. Sarah switched to the command frequency that connected her with all team leaders simultaneously. All teams, we're moving to immediate action. I repeat, we are implementing immediate action protocols. She looked at her watch. 6:15 a.m. The operation she had planned to execute in 8 hours was now happening in the next 30 minutes. Team Alpha, initiate arrest operations at the Paradise Road location. Team Bravo, move on the airport target. Team Charlie, prepare for immediate assault on the downtown apartment. Team Delta, stand by for warehouse operation. Officer Martinez, who had been assigned to perimeter security for the warehouse assault, heard the urgency in Sarah's voice through his radio. Less than 12 hours earlier, he had been arresting her for impersonating a military officer. Now he was part of a counter-terrorism operation that could determine the fate of his city. Commander Chen, he radioed. Local police units are in position to provide perimeter support. Copy that, Officer Martinez. Maintain secure perimeter and be prepared for potential civilian evacuation if this goes sideways. Sarah moved from the surveillance van to an armored command vehicle that had been brought in from Nellis Air Force Base. Inside, multiple screens showed live feeds from helmet cameras worn by tactical team members, drone footage from above each target location, and real-time communications intercepts from NSA monitoring stations. Team Alpha, you are green for arrest operation. Targets Hassan and Al-Rashid, Paradise Road Motel, room 237. The helmet camera footage showed FBI tactical agents moving swiftly through the motel corridor. The building had been quietly evacuated of other guests under the pretext of a gas leak investigation, ensuring that innocent civilians were out of the line of fire. Breaching, came the voice of the Alpha team leader. Sarah watched the tactical team flow into the motel room with practiced precision. Hassan was on the bed. Al-Rashid was at a table working on what appeared to be timing devices for explosive charges. 2 subjects down, no shots fired, package secured. The package was bomb-making equipment that would have been used in the attack later that evening. Sarah felt the first wave of relief, but she knew this was just the beginning. Team Bravo, you are green for airport operation. Target Marcus Webb, Terminal 1 parking garage. The airport arrest was more complex because of the civilian environment, but FBI agents had identified Webb's location through surveillance of his rental car. The arrest happened quickly and quietly, with Webb taken into custody as he walked from the parking garage toward the terminal building. Bravo team reports successful arrest. No civilians compromised. 2 down, but the most dangerous part of the operation was still ahead. The downtown apartment where Volkov was staying was in a residential building with multiple innocent families. The warehouse assault would be even more challenging because of the unknown number of terrorists and the presence of explosive materials. Team Charlie, initiate apartment operation. Exercise extreme caution for civilian safety. Sarah watched the tactical team move through the apartment building, using stealth rather than speed to avoid alerting other residents. Volkov was considered the most dangerous of the known terrorists because of his military experience and access to weapons. Charlie team in position outside target apartment, ready to breach on your command. Sarah looked at the warehouse surveillance feed. The 7 individuals inside were still active, and thermal imaging suggested they were working with materials that could be explosive precursors. Charlie team, execute. Delta team, prepare for warehouse assault. The apartment breach went perfectly. Volkov was arrested while still asleep, with a cache of weapons and ammunition seized from his bedroom. But Sarah's attention was now focused entirely on the warehouse operation. Lieutenant Colonel Harris, status report on warehouse assault preparation. Commander, We've identified potential structural weaknesses in the building that could be exploited if the terrorists detonate explosives during our assault. Recommend immediate evacuation of surrounding buildings. Sarah made another decision that would define her career. Authorize evacuation of a 4-block radius around the warehouse. Coordinate with local police to move civilians to safety. Officer Martinez coordinated the civilian evacuation, going door to door in the industrial area to ensure that workers and residents were moved to a safe distance. The cover story was a natural gas leak that required immediate evacuation for public safety. Commander Chen, civilian evacuation complete. All personnel are at minimum safe distance. Sarah checked the time. 7:30 a.m. The warehouse assault was the final component of the operation, but also the most dangerous. 7 terrorists, unknown quantities of explosives, and the potential for a massive detonation that could destroy several city blocks. Delta Team, you are authorized for warehouse assault. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. I repeat, weapons-free. Sarah watched the tactical feeds as Army Rangers and FBI hostage rescue team operators moved toward the warehouse from multiple directions. Lieutenant Colonel Harris led the assault team with the kind of precision that comes from years of combat experience. Movement inside the building. They know we're coming. The first shots came from inside the warehouse as the terrorists realized they were under attack. Sarah watched the helmet camera footage show muzzle flashes and tactical team members taking cover behind concrete barriers, taking fire from multiple positions. Explosive materials confirmed throughout the building. This was the moment Sarah had been dreading. A firefight inside a building filled with bomb-making materials could result in an explosion that would devastate the surrounding area. All Delta team members, exercise extreme fire discipline. Avoid hitting any potential explosive materials. The battle inside the warehouse lasted 18 minutes. Sarah watched it unfold through multiple camera feeds, making real-time tactical decisions as the assault team methodically cleared the building room by room. Commander, we have 5 terrorists down, 2 attempting to flee through rear exit. Perimeter teams, be advised, 2 hostiles attempting to escape through rear of building. Officer Thompson, who had been positioned with the perimeter security team, spotted the 2 escaping terrorists as they emerged from a back door of the warehouse. Metro units, I have eyes on 2 suspects fleeing east toward the railroad tracks. The foot chase lasted only minutes before both remaining terrorists were apprehended. But the real victory was what the assault team found inside the warehouse. Commander Chen, you need to see this. Lieutenant Colonel Harris's helmet camera showed a workshop that contained enough explosive materials to level half of the Las Vegas Strip. Timing devices, remote detonators, and detailed blueprints of the Venetian Hotel and Casino were spread across multiple tables. This wasn't just a terrorist attack, Harris reported. This was going to be a coordinated assault designed to bring down major buildings. We're looking at potential casualties in the tens of thousands. Sarah stared at the tactical display, realizing how close Las Vegas had come to experiencing a catastrophe that would have been remembered alongside September 11th. The terrorist cell had been planning an attack far more sophisticated and deadly than their initial intelligence had suggested. All teams, Operation Silent Thunder is complete. Objective accomplished. As federal agents began the careful process of securing and cataloging the explosive materials, Sarah allowed herself a moment to reflect on what had just happened. 7 terrorists arrested, enough explosives to devastate a major American city seized, and thousands of innocent lives saved. But she also knew that this was just one victory in a much larger war. Somewhere else, other terrorist cells were planning other attacks against American targets. Her work was far from over. Officer Martinez approached her as she stepped out of the command vehicle. Commander Chen, I just want to say thank you. If you hadn't been driving through Nevada last night, if we hadn't arrested you, Sarah looked at the warehouse where smoke was still rising from the tactical operation. Officer Martinez, sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the best outcomes. Last night you arrested someone you thought was impersonating a military officer. This morning, you helped save your city. As the sun rose over Las Vegas, the city awakened to what appeared to be a normal day. Tourists would flood the Strip, conventions would proceed as planned, and thousands of people would never know how close they had come to experiencing one of the worst terrorist attacks in American history. But Commander Sarah Chen knew, and she carried that knowledge, along with the weight of all the decisions she had made in the past 12 hours, as she prepared for whatever challenge would come next. 3 months after Operation Silent Thunder, Commander Sarah Chen sat in a nondescript office building in Arlington, Virginia, waiting to testify before a classified session of the House Intelligence Committee. The successful prevention of the Las Vegas terrorist attack had sent shockwaves through the national security establishment. But like most of Sarah's professional accomplishments, the details would remain hidden from public view. The hearing room was smaller than she had expected, with soundproof walls and no windows. 7 members of Congress sat behind a curved desk, while Sarah faced them from a simple chair, with only a glass of water and a classified briefing folder. Behind her, Admiral Richardson and 2 other senior Navy officials provided silent support. Committee Chairman Robert Hayes, a former Army colonel from Texas, opened the hearing with a statement that captured the complexity of what had occurred in Nevada. Commander Chen, your actions in Las Vegas represent both an extraordinary success and a significant breach of established protocols. This committee has been tasked with understanding how a routine traffic stop evolved into a major counterterrorism operation, and what implications this has for future special operations security. Sarah had spent weeks preparing for this moment, knowing that her career hung in the balance. The successful operation had saved thousands of lives, but it had also exposed classified programs and personnel in ways that made senior officials extremely uncomfortable. Chairman Hayes, members of the committee, I understand your concerns about operational security. My decision to reveal my identity and mission to local law enforcement was made under extraordinary circumstances, with time-critical implications for civilian safety. Representative Maria Santos from California leaned forward. Commander Chen, our briefing materials indicate that you've been involved in classified special operations for over a decade, including missions that have never been publicly acknowledged. Can you help us understand how someone with your background and security clearances ended up in handcuffs on a Nevada highway? Sarah chose her words carefully, knowing that everything she said was being recorded and would be analyzed by intelligence professionals for years to come. Representative Santos, the nature of special operations requires personnel to maintain cover identities and operational security even when interacting with friendly forces. My arrest occurred because local law enforcement had no way to verify my claims without compromising classified information. Representative David Kim from Virginia, himself a former CIA analyst, asked the question that everyone in the room was thinking about. Commander Chen, you made a decision to break operational security protocols in order to coordinate with local authorities. That decision ultimately led to a successful operation, but it also exposed classified programs to dozens of unauthorized personnel. How do we balance operational success with security requirements? Sarah's decision to reveal her identity and mission details to local police had violated every protocol she had been trained to follow. But that same decision had enabled the rapid coordination that made Operation Silent Thunder possible. Representative Kim, special operations personnel are trained to make split-second decisions under pressure with incomplete information. In this case, the choice was between maintaining perfect operational security and preventing a terrorist attack that could have killed thousands of American citizens. She paused, making eye contact with each committee member. I chose to save American lives. If that decision was wrong, I accept full responsibility for the consequences. Admiral Richardson had been silent throughout the hearing, but now he leaned forward to address the committee. Chairman Hayes, if I may, Commander Chen's decision-making in Las Vegas exemplifies exactly the kind of leadership and judgment that makes her one of our most valuable special operations officers. The protocols exist for good reasons, but there are always going to be situations where the protocols must be adapted to meet the mission requirements. Representative Hayes nodded but pressed further. Admiral Richardson, we understand that flexibility is important in special operations, but we're also told that Commander Chen's role in Navy Special Warfare Command is itself classified. How do we provide oversight of programs we're not fully briefed on? The question highlighted one of the fundamental tensions in American democracy. the need for congressional oversight of military operations versus the operational security requirements that made those operations possible. Sarah realized that this hearing was about much more than her actions in Las Vegas. It was about the role of women in special operations, the balance between security and accountability, and the evolving nature of threats facing American homeland security. Chairman Hayes, she said, I'd like to address that question directly. My role in Special Warfare Command has been classified not because the work is inappropriate for congressional oversight, but because acknowledging it publicly could compromise ongoing operations and endanger personnel. Representative Santos looked up from her notes. Commander Chen, are you saying that there are other female personnel in similar roles that Congress doesn't know about? Sarah glanced at Admiral Richardson, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Representative Santos, I'm saying that the integration of women into special operations has been proceeding more rapidly and extensively than has been publicly acknowledged. The classified nature of this integration is designed to protect operational effectiveness, not to hide inappropriate activities. The revelation caused a stir among the committee members. Representative Kim leaned back in his chair, clearly processing the implications. Commander, are you telling us that women have been participating in direct combat special operations missions despite official policies that prohibited such participation? This was the moment Sarah had been dreading and anticipating throughout her career. For over a decade, she had operated in the shadows, her gender irrelevant to the success or failure of critical missions. But now, in a sterile hearing room in Virginia, she was being asked to explain why those shadows had been necessary. Representative Kim, I'm telling you that when American lives are at stake, the most qualified personnel are deployed regardless of gender. Official policies often lag behind operational realities, especially in classified programs where flexibility is essential. Representative Hayes studied the classified briefing materials before continuing. Commander Chen, our information indicates that you've led or participated in operations that resulted in the elimination of high-value targets, including individuals on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list. Is that accurate? This Sarah felt the weight of every mission she had ever led, every life-or-death decision she had made in service to her country. Yes, sir, that's accurate. And these operations were conducted while official Pentagon policy prohibited women from serving in direct combat roles. Yes, sir. The hearing room fell silent as the implications sank in. For years, political leaders had debated whether women should be allowed to serve in combat positions, while women like Sarah had already been serving in those positions with distinction. Representative Santos broke the silence. Commander Chen, why wasn't Congress informed about these operations and your participation in them? Admiral Richardson answered before Sarah could respond. Representative Santos, these operations were conducted under existing congressional authorizations for special operations activities. The specific personnel involved in those operations have always been classified for operational security reasons. Representative Kim wasn't satisfied with that answer. Admiral Richardson, there's a difference between classifying individual names and concealing the fact that official Pentagon policies were being circumvented. Sarah realized that the hearing was moving into dangerous territory. The politicians were more interested in the political implications of women in combat than they were in the operational successes that had protected American lives. Representative Kim, she said, with respect, I don't believe official policies were being circumvented. I believe that operational requirements led to the evolution of how those policies were interpreted and implemented. Chairman Hayes looked at his notes before asking the question that would define the rest of Sarah's career. Commander Chen, given everything that's happened, given the exposure of classified programs and the questions that have been raised about policy implementation, do you believe your actions in Las Vegas were justified? She had saved thousands of lives and prevented a terrorist attack that could have devastated American morale. But she had also exposed classified programs, violated security protocols, and forced senior officials to answer uncomfortable questions about policies they had preferred to keep quietly evolving. Chairman Hayes, 7 terrorists were planning to detonate enough explosives to level multiple buildings on the Las Vegas Strip during a major international event. If that attack had succeeded, we would be having a very different conversation today about intelligence failures and homeland security vulnerabilities. She paused, choosing her final words carefully. I made the decisions I thought were necessary to protect American lives. If those decisions were wrong, I accept full responsibility. But I would make the same decisions again under the same circumstances. The hearing concluded with Chairman Hayes announcing that the committee would prepare a classified report for submission to the full House Intelligence Committee. Sarah was dismissed with the understanding that her future in Navy Special Warfare Command would depend on the committee's recommendations. As she walked out of the hearing room with Admiral Richardson, Sarah felt the uncertainty that had defined her entire career. She had spent 15 years proving herself in a world that didn't expect women to succeed, and now her greatest success was being questioned by the very people she had sworn to protect. "Commander," Admiral Richardson said as they waited for the elevator, "I want you to know that regardless of what this committee decides, you've served your country with distinction and honor." Sarah looked at her reflection in the polished elevator doors. The woman staring back at her looked tired, older than her years, marked by the weight of decisions that most people would never have to make. "Admiral, do you think it was worth it? Everything we've built in Special Warfare Command, all the progress we've made integrating women into special operations, was exposing all of that worth saving Las Vegas?" Admiral Richardson smiled for the first time that day. "Commander Chen, 3 months ago, 4,000 people went to bed in Las Vegas with no idea that someone was planning to kill them. They woke up the next morning and went about their lives because of decisions you made and risks you took." The elevator arrived, and as they stepped inside, he continued, "Every one of those people has families, friends, careers, dreams. Every one of them will have experiences and accomplish things that wouldn't have been possible if that terrorist attack had succeeded. When you calculate the worth of what happened in Las Vegas, you're not just counting the lives saved that night. You're counting all the lives that will be lived because of what you did." 6 months later, Commander Sarah Chen received a promotion to captain and was assigned to lead a new joint task force focused on domestic counterterrorism operations. The House Intelligence Committee had quietly recommended that the integration of women into special operations be accelerated and formalized, removing the operational ambiguity that had defined Sarah's early career. Officer Martinez and Officer Thompson were both commended for their actions during Operation Silent Thunder and were invited to participate in a federal law enforcement training program focused on counterterrorism coordination. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department implemented new protocols for verifying military personnel credentials, ensuring that future situations like Sarah's arrest would be handled with appropriate consideration for operational security requirements. But perhaps the most significant change was the one that occurred in Sarah herself. The woman who had spent her career operating in the shadows, whose achievements were known only to a small circle of cleared personnel, had been forced to step into the light and defend not just her actions, but her right to take those actions. On a quiet Sunday morning, exactly 1 year after her arrest on Highway 95, Sarah Chen stood in her office at the Pentagon, looking at a photograph from the Las Vegas Technology Summit. 4,000 people smiled at the camera, unaware that they owed their lives to a woman most of them would never meet. She had spent her career proving that she belonged in rooms where no one expected to see her. Now she was working to ensure that the next generation of women in special operations wouldn't have to operate in the shadows, wouldn't have to choose between their mission and their recognition. As she prepared for another day of coordinating counterterrorism operations around the world, Sarah reflected on the price of recognition. She had gained acknowledgement for her achievements, but she had also lost the anonymity that had protected her and her operations for over a decade. It was a trade-off she had never wanted to make, but one that had become necessary the moment she decided that saving American lives was more important than protecting her cover. Commander Sarah Chen, now Captain Sarah Chen, had learned that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that force you to reveal who you really are, even when you'd prefer to remain in the shadows where the real work gets done. The rain had stopped falling on Highway 95, but the impact of that night continued to ripple through American special operations in ways that would be felt for generations to come.